Once you have finished your watercolor moon, then we're going to work on the background. The first thing we're going to do is cut out our watercolor moon from the paper so that we can have a shape to trace onto our background paper. We're going to be making a background where we mix tints of a color. So the color here is purple, but we see some different tints of purple because we have purple and white mixed together, which makes a tint. So here I'm going to cut out my moon shape very carefully, trying to make the most perfect circle that I can, just cutting on the edge, going slowly. Now that my moon shape is cut out, I can make sure that my name is on the back because it may have gotten cut off in the cutting process if your name wasn't in the middle of your paper. Also make sure your class code is with your name. We're not going to glue it onto our paper just yet. So we're gonna work on our background painting now. So you can write your name and class code on the back of your paper. And we are going to use the moon shape that we cut out to trace the shape of where the moon will be glued to. So you want it to be in the middle of your paper. So make sure it looks pretty centered, and then you can use a pencil to trace your moon shape. Then we're going to set our moon aside. We don't need it for the rest of today until our background is dry. So we are going to be picking one color plus white for our background. This example, I used purple. I'm going to be using blue for this demonstration. So we'll have white paint and the color that you pick. You'll need a water cup and a paintbrush with a flat edge like this red one. And you'll need a paper towel to blot your brush. With this paint that we're using, it is liquid paint and we don't need to add any water to it to make it work. So we don't want our brush to be super wet when we're mixing our colors together. You can use your paper towel to blot your brush or even your messy mat, but be careful that you don't get any other colors on your brush that are on the messy mat. So the paper towel probably works best. The first thing that we're going to do is take just our regular white paint without mixing any of the color in, and we're going to paint around the circle that we traced that was the moon shape. So I'm just going around with my brush, adding a good amount of white to my paper. Now we want to work pretty quickly here because our paint will dry fast. And what we're doing here is mixing our colors when we're making tints of the color that we chose. Our next step here is making a very light blue. So I'm going to take a little bit of my blue and I'm going to mix it into the white, just a little bit at a time. I want it to be mostly white, but just a little bit of blue. You can mix on your paper plate until you like the color that you made. So this is just a little tint of the color. Go back and forth with your brush until it looks like it's mixed in. Then you can paint right next to the white that you added. You may need to go back and forth a little bit to blend the white into the tint that you made. So I'm going to go around the whole circle shape, but I'm leaving a little bit of regular white because I don't want where the moon is glued down to just be a color. I want it to have some white showing. So I need to blend this tint into the white paint. To do that, you can go back and forth with your brush, making sure that you're painting in a circle shape. Remember, this should just be a slight tint of the color, so you've barely added any of the paint. The key here is also overlapping with the white that you put down first. So now I can add a little bit more blue to my white paint. I'm gonna add it to what I already made. So I'm making that tint just a little bit darker. But you wanna make sure that you have really mixed it in. Sometimes it might be helpful to go to another area of your plate if you feel like your colors are getting a little bit too messy. So then I can paint right next to the color that I already had on my paper. And I'm trying to go back and forth a little bit to blend it in. Remember that we want to work quickly with this process so that our paint doesn't dry and it's easier to blend the colors together. You need to paint all the way to your edges here, so that's why we have our messy mat underneath our paper. If you run out of the color that you made, then you'll need to mix it again and try to get as close to it as you had before. You can also hold down the middle of your paper. Because we're not adding any paint there, that's a good place to hold your paper down instead of the corners, which we will eventually be adding paint to. Now I feel like my colors are not quite blending as much as I want. So I'm going to rinse off my brush and get all of the blue off. And I'm going to go back in with just white paint. You may need to do that a little bit too, because this is a process that takes a little bit of time to blend those colors gradually. Now remember, when you clean your brush off, that you want to wipe it on your paper towel to make sure that you got all of the color and enough water off. And remember, we don't want our brush to be too wet when we're painting, so we're blotting it on our paper towel. Now I'm going to paint with a little bit of white over the blue. So I'm overlapping my colors, and this is helping the gradual fade from white to blue. And I'm going back and forth with my brush so that my paint blends nicely, making sure that I'm painting in a circle shape. Now I can mix my next tint. So I'm gonna take some blue and some white, and I want it to be just a little bit more blue than the last blue that I used. A tint more of blue. When you mix your colors, you really need to make sure that you're blending in all of the color so you can see what tint you have made. I think that looks pretty good, so I am ready to add that to my paper. I want to overlap this with the color that I already have on my paper. And here I can't go all the way around, I can just do the sides. If you feel like your paint is getting a little bit streaky, then you just need to go back and forth gently with your brush until it looks like it's gradually blended. Remember to keep your brush at a curve because we're trying to paint in a circle shape. Now I think with my next color, I can go ahead and just add the pure blue without adding any white. And then I can blend that in to the blue that I already have. I'm gonna paint all the way to the corners with this. You should make about 3 or so tints of the color. Remember, a tint is a color plus white. So 3 lighter versions of the color that you pick. Then you can paint the corners of your paper with the pure color, like I am doing here. Sometimes you might need to go over the pure color a few times because it's a little bit more see-through than the color and white mixed together. I'm gonna go ahead and do that to all of my corners. Here, I'm adding a little more white around the center because I feel like it got covered by some of the blue paint. We want our moons to have a glow around them like they would in real life, so make sure that you don't lose the white that you added at first. Once your painting is dry, then you can go ahead and glue your moon shape to your background. We're going to use white liquid glue to glue our moon shapes in the middle of our paper. So you can flip over your moon, and then you're going to put a good amount of glue on your moon shape. Go all the way around the edges. Remember that the moon is made of watercolor paper, which is pretty thick, so we need a good amount of glue to make it stay in place. I also put some in the middle, and then I'm going to make sure that I like the direction that it's going. If you have a certain area that's the top or bottom, make sure you put it in the right direction that you want it to be. And then I'm going to gently press it down so it stays in place. Once you're done, you can go ahead and put it on the drying rack to dry. I can't wait to see how your project turns out.